All right, friends, thank you for your patience. As you know, we're Baptists, which means that we operate on Baptist time, which means that we get together around the time that we say that we're going to start. So, thank you for coming to our first workshop, and the title, I think I'd know this, but it's not right at the top of mind for me. But we're going to be talking today about online ministry and the ways that online ministry allows you to reach maybe a different kind of audience and generate kind of a different approach. I don't think so, but so empower and inspire provoking goodness in digital ministry. So we have with us Reverend Meg Biddle and Reverend Shobhan Walker, who both do different kinds of digital ministry. And we're going to be asking them a few questions and really get the show on the road. That wasn't quite the question I had in mind, but now that you mention it, Curtis, what is the answer? All right. Well, let me start off by asking our workshop leaders to introduce themselves. Meg, would you go first?
Sure. I am Reverend Meg Biddle. I currently serve at ABHMS. I've been there for 4.5 years. I have been ABC all my life. I grew up in the great state of Indiana also, yeah. And my MDiv came from Anderson University School of Theology, home of the Gaithers. And they're a Wesleyan holiness school that let this Baptist girl in there and let herself kind of deconstruct everything that she believed. And I've served 2 churches, one in upstate New York and one in the Great Rivers region in Illinois. And like I said, I've been at ABHMS now for 4.5 years. I'm in the dissertation part of my DMin at Central.
So. What is your online ministry?
What is my online ministry? I'm wearing it. So I'm wearing my shirt as Paul is wearing my shirt. So I have a podcast called Ministry Mondays with Meg. I'm Meg, and that's how I open the show as well. So, and it's been going for 3 years now. Yeah. I don't know how much you want us to say it.
Yeah, so share a little bit more about what your podcast is.
So do you want me to, like, how it got started? Is that what you want? Or
well,
are we going to go there later?
Just kind of what the podcast does.
Okay. So the premise of the podcast is talking, obviously, to people, but not just pastors. Okay, so we... any of us who have served in ministry, who have supported ministry, Sunday morning is worship. I feel like all those other things that happen, that's ministry, and people don't always get that food ministries and taking care of people and having their own podcasts and writing books and things like that are ministries too. And so that's really the focus of the podcast, is just to give people a place to come and tell their stories and share their joy. So that's how we begin each podcast, with the I'm Meg. And normally I get to watch my guest laugh as I go through my little spiel, and then I introduce my guest. Today my guest is Paul, who has been on my show 3 times. He's a trivia question, actually. And I just say Paul, for people who don't know you, please tell everybody who you are and how you serve, what you do, and then we just have a conversation about ministry, about all the things that my guest talks about. And at the end, we ask everyone the same question. It's think about all of those things that you do in your life and what brings you joy. So at the beginning and at the end, everyone is asked the same two questions, and those are the things that connect them to everyone, to one another. So while our ministries may look very different, yeah, we all have joy.
Well, I think I'm going to crib your question here and say, Shobhan, for those who don't know you, could you please introduce yourself and say where and how you serve?
Well done.
Hi, I'm Jane, and this is my kitchen. Okay, no. That is my intro to my ministry, but I'll back up. Hi, I'm the Reverend Shobhan Walker. I was born and raised in Oakland, California, and still, Paul was also born and raised in Oakland, California. I have had the privilege of being on Meg's podcast once, so that was wonderful. I graduated from Berkeley School of Theology a couple of years ago. I am newly ordained as of November 2nd. I will be 1 year ordained, fortunately. So my focus with my ministry has been basically the LGBTQIA community. It's in my streams, which you'll find out more about in a moment, and in my ministry when I'm preaching, when I'm doing pulpit supply, all of that. So that's my intro.
And can you tell us about your Twitch stream?
So I do live streams on a platform called Twitch, and the best way for me to describe it is, a lot of you will remember this, back in the 80s, maybe 90s or so, where every holiday season, Thanksgiving or Christmas, there was a call-in line. So if you had no idea what to do with the turkey, your cornbread burned or something went horribly wrong, you could call this number and they would take your question live. You would literally be talking to the person in real time. And that's basically how a live stream works. Only difference is, instead of calling a phone number, you're talking through chat. So my goal is to create a space in my live streams where people can come and talk to me about whatever it is, because I want my community to feel secure and safe. If they want to talk to me or come out to me about being queer, that's the place to do it. If they want to ask me questions about scripture and being queer, that's the place to do it. If they just want to tell me they had a bad day and they want some virtual hugs, that's the place to do it. One of my, we have redemptions as part of Twitch, and a redemption is basically, as you watch, you gain a certain number of points, watch points, and you can redeem those for, whatever. One of my friends has a redemption where they switch hats. So if someone redeems switch hat, they take off their baseball cap and they put on like a Santa cap or something like that. One of my redemptions is called pastoral motivation. So if you come in and you are having a horrible time and you just need someone to say something uplifting, then you can redeem that, and I will stop what I'm doing or whatever I'm cooking, and I'll, occasionally put on my stole. And, if they tell me something about what's going on, great. If they don't, I just kind of wing it, and I say something uplifting and supportive to them. I will note that a lot of this happened during the pandemic. I was doing pastoral motivation redemptions 3, 4, 5 every stream, and my stream normally goes for about 4 hours. So you can see how that pans out. And they were very helpful. People would send me private messages saying, thank you for saying this. I really needed to hear X, Y, Z. And occasionally, it turned into a sermon, but it was a 5-minute sermon, and people were fine with that because, again, it was something that they needed to hear. So, yeah.
And does your stream have a theme?
My theme for my stream is soul food around the world. So it's not just, my family's from the South, so of course I make the standard collard greens, cornbread, all of that, but I make food from China, I make food from Finland and Poland and the Ukraine and all over the world. And that's part of my challenge, because one of the ways that we connect, especially as Christians and especially as Baptists, is through food, even if you're not eating it yourself. So watching me cook, it's like being in someone's kitchen and just having this conversation with them while they're preparing dinner. And when we think about scripture, we think about the Last Supper, we think about the feeding of the 5,000, we think about the numerous times that Jesus went to dinner with people and managed to spread the gospel there. So my goal is to not just say that I'm a Christian, but for them to figure that out through my actions and through my words and how I address certain topics.
And so what was it that drove you to start doing this live stream?
Start?
Yeah, I can. My boss, actually. So I had been working at ABHMS for about a year, and our executive director, Dr. Jeffrey Hagray, said, Meg, I want you to create a community. That was all. End thought there. Nope, not gonna tell you how to do it. I just want you to do it. And so I went, what am I gonna do? And I thought about it for a long time, and then I went, a podcast, that sounds like fun, right? Anybody can do that. And so I had no idea what I was doing, and found somebody at work who said, if you schedule some time on my schedule, I will help you get set up for your first one. And so I'm looking at his schedule. This was on a Wednesday, and the only time he had available was at 11 a.m. on Monday. And so I went, okay, we'll do it then. And he's like, this is Wednesday. You have your first guest lined up? Do you have a name? Do you have all that stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I have all of that. So by Monday, I called my friend Scotty Robertson and said, hey, will you be on my podcast? He's like, you've got a podcast? I do now. And Scotty, if you know Scotty, is like the best cheerleader for ABHMS / ABC USA there is. And you ask Scotty one question, and he talks for like a Baptist pastor. Yeah. And so when you're so incredibly nervous for your first one, that's the way to go. And so because we like alliteration, came up with the Ministry Mondays with Meg. And as I was kind of like joking around, I was like, I'm just gonna go, I'm Meg. And they're like, yes, do that. And it just kind of, it stuck, and now it's a thing. But it wasn't till we were about 20 episodes in or so that the boss calls me to his office, and he's like, so, I hear you're doing a podcast. Yeah, I am. And he says, that is not what I had in mind for you. But I hear wonderful things about it. I know that you're doing, you're forming your community, and so I'm blessing it and saying carry on, and you're like, because I love doing this thing. So that was how it was born.
So for me, my husband had a friend who was a streamer. She streamed video games 9 times out of 10. If you go to Twitch, you will find gamers. That's 90% of the platform. But it's a lot like YouTube. You can find whatever you want if you look. So she was streaming games, so he's like, you know, I could do that. So he started streaming games, and at the time we had 2 roommates, and another was like, well, I can do that. So he started streaming games, and then his partner was like, okay, I'm not good at games, so I'm gonna stream crochet. So they started streaming crochet. And then I was like, well, I'm terrible at video games. The last time I tried crochet, I inadvertently made the Eiffel Tower. Maybe this whole streaming thing is not for me. And then another friend of mine said, did you know that there's a food and drink community on Twitch? And I said, no. And she said, yeah, they exist. So there is a place for you. You just have to figure out how to get in there. So, you know, got my laptop, got a camera, connected with some of those folks in food and drink, and once they started watching some of my early streams, they said, oh, we can tell that you're talented. You obviously love to cook and you're pretty darn good at it, but you don't have a title for your stream. And who are you going to be in this platform? And I said, well, I'm not sure. So same friend's husband said, well, why don't you call it soul food? Because you're about to go to seminary and you like cooking, your family's from the South, just bring it all together. I'm like, okay, so what do I do about a name? Well, didn't you say your dad's name was John Henry? Yes. Why don't you be Jane? Brilliant. So that's how I became, you know, Jane Henry, the soul food queen on Twitch, apparently, cooking with soul. So that's my theme.
So when you've been doing something for as long as you guys have, any ministry, but especially digital ministry, you watch that develop and change. What would you say are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned in your time doing this digital ministry?
Yeah, when I first started, I thought it was going to be about the pandemic, about being emerging from the pandemic and how ministry had changed and things like that. And the first couple of episodes were in that direction. But by the time I got to episode, I think it was 3 or 4, when you're asking this pastor, because I started with my friends, you start with who you know, and asking them to tell you things that their church does, you're trying to get things out of them, you find out that the church is supporting a tiny house village that's there on the church property, and you're like, why don't I know about this? Why doesn't anybody know about this? I mean, and so there was that pivot, and it was with Ben Wakefield, his episode, that I'm going, okay, this is boring just to talk about church. I mean, honestly, where you close your eyes, you can be in any Baptist church. You know how this American Baptist stuff works. But what else do you have? And then when he's talking about this tiny house village, I'm going, oh, people need to know about this. And so it was there that you're like, yeah, there's so much more than just the emerging from the pandemic. And then once you figure that out, what your topic is about, it is so important that you stick to it, that sometimes you do have to tell people no. That's a hard one for us, right? The no, but that no, it doesn't fit the purpose of the show. Could I do it about something else? I mean, could we just lend your name to it? Well, no, because this is I mean, as terrible as that sounds, no, this is mine, and this is what this ministry is about. So that has become a very important part for me, is that saying no, and no, this is not fit for purpose, and be happy to talk to you about other things, that kind of thing, but really sticking to your topic, being who you are, and holding on to that. Yeah.
Let's see, what have I learned? Okay, so Meg mentioned saying no, and as a podcaster, some of the things that she would run into as problems would not necessarily be what I would run into as a live streamer, and vice versa. So for instance, she does not have to deal with trolls, but I do. One of the good things about the things that I've studied, and I've been part of a cohort with an organization called the Reformation Project, which teaches people how to read scripture for context and history in order to combat, anti-LGBT, naysayers, so to speak. And the information that I got while I was in seminary and taking certain classes and connecting with certain other types of ministry and so on. So I've learned, and I need to talk to Doug more about this, how to fight in a constructive manner. And when a troll comes in and purposely tries to, get under my skin by saying things like, oh, LGBT people need to go to hell, it's sinful. I'm like, okay, my mods, the first time this happened, my mods were like, oh, no, say the word, blink one time, and we will instantly ban this person. I'm like, no, let him speak, because this is going to be an educational moment. So for the next 30 minutes, this guy is throwing out, concept after concept and using what we call the clobber verses and so on, and I'm refuting him by pointing out context and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually he got bored and went away. And one of my mods is a gay Canadian, and he said, wow, I did not think that was even possible. So I learned something that day, that if I choose to engage like that, it's not about me, and it's not about humoring the troll. It's about teaching something to everyone else who is listening. So they learn something about scripture, they learn something about context and history. And as Christians, we try to live out the Bible, and we try to live out the gospel the best way that we can. And like I said, my version of doing that is showing people, not just telling them. And I think everyone in my audience saw that day, how serious I am about my ministry and the ways that I try to enforce that. The other thing that I learned is that you have to meet people where they are. In seminary, we learned about the concepts of high Christianity and low Christianity and that kind of thing. So high Christianity is very scripture-oriented and very, trust in God, have faith, everything will work out. Low Christianity is more, okay, let's do a practical application of our Christianity. You are homeless, maybe we can find you shelter. Here's some food banks you can use, things like that. This is our living it out, as opposed to, just quoting things. And a lot of my viewers need that kind of low Christianity connection in order to understand what I mean by the gospel and what I mean by being a Christian and so on. And they've asked questions about my faith. I'm more than happy to tell them everything about it. And because of that approach, I've managed to get folks who were former Christians. In fact, the wedding that I officiated last week, the groom was a devout Christian until about 25 years ago, and something happened in his church and he just walked out and never came back. But he wanted me to officiate. Even though he knows that I am an American Baptist and I'm ordained in the whole, he wanted me to do it. which meant a lot to me, because I'm like, okay, apparently he's seeing me for who I am and what I represent, not what he thinks I am, which is a big deal. And so people like him, I have atheists coming in, I have Satanists coming in, I have Jewish folks coming in, just all across the spectrum, because they know the kind of person that I am. And it's a really great feeling. So that's a few of the things that I've learned while I've done this.
We're almost 30 minutes in, and we haven't mentioned the key word from the title and from our conference, which is provoke. And so how do you feel that your ministries have provoked goodness and love in the communities that you're ministering to?
Well, some of the people that I've had on my show, the Reverend Dr. Donnie Anderson was one of my guests, and having her come on and tell her story, and having some of our region folks afterwards tell me that they had told their pastors in their region that they couldn't be on my show, I kind of felt like I was doing something right. And guess what? I had 2 of their pastors on my show anyway. So, you know, you can't tell me, you can tell me what you think I should do, but I don't answer to you, you know. At the end of it all, I answer to God and no one else. And I treasure that episode with Dr. Anderson, you know. So yeah, that's it, is standing up for what you know, what you believe, who you are, who this person that God has called you to be, and doing the hard stuff anyway. Yeah, that's where I provoke. Do it anyway.
Face the fear and do it anyway. Let's see, provoking goodness. I think just by cultivating the community that I have, and people see me as sort of the leader of that community, they self-provoke, for lack of a better description. If, again, someone comes in, has a hard day, and I'm not paying attention to chat because there's something on the stove that I need to do or whatever, you know, inevitably someone in chat will say, "Oh, I'm really sorry you had such a hard day. I really hope it gets better. You know, here, have a virtual hug," or something like that. And then other people will chime in, "Hey, have you thought about so-and-so? Maybe that can help you." Or, "Yeah, I went through the same thing, and I totally understand what you're experiencing." And I turn around, and this whole chat has taken place in the last 5 minutes, and I have to scroll up to catch up because everyone wants to jump in. So I'm like, okay, we are doing it here. We are doing the thing, and we are being good to each other, and the community is supporting each other just as it's supposed to, which makes me feel better, because I'm like, I am the one who chose to start streaming in the first place. But in the end, at this point, I have those people, those regulars who show up and are supportive just as I would be. So they're learning how to do this on their own in this community and building it up just the way I would have wanted. Again, when trolls come in, they will look to me for guidance, and if I say, "Let them speak," because I'm going to hang them with their own petard, they're like, "Okay, this is going to be fun, we're going to go get the popcorn." And again, provoking goodness, because I don't have to descend to their level, I don't have to call names, I don't have to say anything insulting. All I have to do is educate. And whether or not they walk away with a lesson, it's fine. But my goal is to educate. And by doing that, that's another bit of provoking goodness. So.
One of the challenges of digital ministries like yours is that you don't get to see your community? Like, I know that Ministry Mondays with Meg is technically a live stream, but most of your community follows you as a podcast or watching the videos after the fact. And Shobhan, you do these live streams, people are interacting with you that way, but these are mostly people you've never actually met. All you have is a name on the screen, and usually not even their actual name. So can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to serve an unseen community?
It's hard, but it's also beautiful and lovely, because then you go places and people will do things like at the last Space for Grace, I was there and sitting at my table at lunch, and I introduced myself to a gentleman, and he says, you know, I said, I'm Meg, nice to meet you, and he goes, I'm Steve. You know, like I do my intro, and I'm like, oh, you watch the show? And he's like, yeah, I'm a fan, you know, and you're like, okay. And yeah, and that he's like, I think there's something in these episodes, you know, that will inspire me to try to do a thing too, you know, and you're like, okay, that's, or people who have been on this show, when you go to one of these gatherings, you know, like you're wearing the shirt, or they'll go and they'll want to compare episode numbers, like Morgan's, I'm episode number 5, you know, I'm 5, what number are you, you know, I'm sure you're later than me, so, you know, that, you know, it's things like that, it's that you know it's getting out there, but it also surprises you who is actually watching and engaged and things like that. So it's hard, it's challenging, but it's also like incredibly rewarding too when you have someone come up to you that you had no idea was watching the show and say, this thing that this person said really resonated with me and things like that. So yeah.
So for me, let's see. For me, it's fairly easy because I'm that type of Gen Xer that doesn't like face-to-face convos anyway. I don't even like phone calls. I'm the text me, message me person. So, you know, being on camera is fine. I am totally fine with that. And I don't mind the parasocial relationship that I have with my viewers. Sure, they can see me, I may not be able to see them. It does help that some of them are also streamers, so I do get to see their faces, even if I don't necessarily know their real names. But cultivating that kind of relationship and being able to connect with them is pretty big for me. That's what keeps them coming back. It's not just, you know, me making a bowl of fårikål from, you know, Norway or something. It's the whole conversation and it's the whole environment that they're in. So for me, it's not so much of a challenge, but, and also, Meg didn't get a chance to mention this, but we also both have experienced what it's like to connect with people from around the world. And it's amazing. I have viewers from Israel. I had one person in particular who connected with me basically before the conflict started. And then after it started, he kind of dropped off the radar. And then he came back briefly just to let me know where he'd been and what had been going on. His family's grocery store apparently had been blown up and they were, you know, trying to find safety. I've had folks from the Ukraine come in and tell me what's going on in their country, and folks from Hungary who just wanted to say hello. I had another person from Russia come in and tell me what's going on with him. And knowing that your medium, your program, is enough to bring in people, not just in your local area, not just in your state, but from the other side of the world, is a mind-blowing experience. And it makes you wonder, how did you find me, and what is it about me and my culture that makes you want to continue watching? So it's pretty impressive.
And I'll just say, so Justin Thing was one of my earlier episodes, and Justin is originally from Myanmar. And on his episode, his was one we did live. And as you're watching, and you've got 3,000 people watching this episode, and his is probably, I think his is the longest that I've ever done. It was well over an hour, but you still have people watching and engaged. You're like, holy moly. And then when you look at the back end, when you go and you look at the analytics, and you see that those people that are watching, yeah, Justin lives in Indianapolis, his ministry is there, but the people that are watching are in Myanmar, and you're going, okay, hang on. These folks are in the middle of war, and I know from some of my classmates at Central that sometimes, at least where he's at, they watch things on the side of a cow. That's their TV screen, is the side of the cow. And my first question is, how you get the cow to stay put. But apparently, he says she doesn't really mind at all. Whatever. But, when you go and you're going, people are in the midst of war. And they're taking time to listen to this young man tell his ministry story. Then you're going, you just sit back and go, and isn't God good? Those are the wow moments. Yeah. And that I get to do this thing. All I'm doing is providing a platform, but like that I get to do this thing is huge. Yeah.
So one of the things that I think is very true of your stream is you've got people from all around the world who are watching, who are engaging. Do you do anything in particular to help encourage that intercultural participation, or is there some way that you engage that seems to draw in an audience that isn't just people who happen to look or think like you?
For me, I dare say a majority of my viewers don't look like me. But when intercultural things come up, it seems to happen very organically. There was one stream that I was making tamales, and one of my viewers who happened to be from China said, "Oh, that looks like lo mai gai." And then this whole conversation started about food that is wrapped in things and then cooked. So really interesting, and there's all these connections being made between this food and that food, and what is the difference between, a tamale that's made in Mexico and one that is made in Guatemala, and so on. And it was great. And I didn't have to do anything except fold some leaves. So when things like that happen, it shows me even more about who my community is and who I'm talking to and what they're interested in. And again, since they're already sort of in a space that is very cooperative and uplifting, everybody wants to know more about everybody else. So, yeah.
And I think for me, it's just been as this audience has grown, as the community that I was called to build grows, they really do. They find each other in ways, or it's after we finish the podcast going, have you met this person? And if not, let me connect you with that person that can support you and your ministry. And sometimes it's something within ABHMS, sometimes it's people within ABC. other denominations, non-denominational, it doesn't matter. I mean, one of my guests earlier this year was a gentleman from Philadelphia. Was that this year? When you did your presentation for last year?
I was
Gary
last
Mills.
on, I thought, earlier this year.
Okay,
but
so when you were in the Shark Tank for Jesus, when you were in Shark Tank for Jesus, you guys don't know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, okay.
Lauren, that's the best one-sentence pitch of that program that I've ever heard.
So Gary Mills was one of the folks that came as I want to call them the judges, but that's not really right. But he has this ministry, shoot basketballs, not people. And so when you think that about interculturally, we're talking from King of Prussia to Philly, and that there's this film that was made. Bad things happen in Philadelphia, you know, and this man came on my show, and we didn't really talk about God. That wasn't. We talked about people staying alive and why this mattered, but they're still holy in all of that. So I think it's just all the things that we get to do.
If you guys had one, maybe two pieces of advice for someone who is going to begin doing the kinds of social media, communities that you guys are doing, whether that's building a podcast and the community around that, or a Twitch stream and the community around that, could you maybe share one or two pieces of advice for people who might be thinking in that way?
One, back to what I said earlier, stick to your truth, stick to your thing, and when you've figured out what your ministry is about, stick with that. Unless you decide you're going to go in a completely different direction because that thing isn't working. Once you've figured out where you are, stay there. Be consistent. If you're gonna offer shows Monday at 11, we've had a few episodes that aired on Ministry Mondays with Meg on Tuesday because we were just recording so many and they all needed to get out. And looking back, I should have stuck with the Monday. So those things is sticking. Be who you are. Be consistent, and know that there's plenty of people who are more than happy to help you, criticize you, all those things. But it's such a gift, really, to get to do this. That doesn't. You just let it go and keep moving forward and do what you know is right, and don't give up. And if you need help, though, ask for help. If you need to talk to somebody who's done this thing before because you have no idea what you're doing, then schedule some time with them and ask for help. Yeah.
Well, and I also have two things. One, do not ever think that you are too old to do social media or to do any sort of podcast or live stream. On Twitch, in my time there, I have seen a 12-year-old boy doing food and drink, with his parents helping. And I am friends with a 75-year-old woman with multiple sclerosis who does gaming. You have not lived until you have seen a great-grandmother play GTA 5 with her friends. Educational opportunity. And two, to make it short, I will give you the advice that was given to me by a drunk Canadian chef when I was trying to figure out if I wanted to start streaming. Just do it.
Yeah, we're trying to get to the question time, but I'm not locating the audience mic, and I wanted to make sure because these. All right, friends, any questions? I'll bring a mic to you.
Two questions. Oh, wait a minute, that's my deep voice. So 2 questions. 1, podcasting on a budget. There's so many choices out there as far as equipment's concerned. If there was a resource hub where folks could get some recommendations, because the budget thing is, I think, for local churches, if they wanted as a way to connect with their neighborhood and their community. So that would be the first thing. And then the second thing is probably a little bit more personal, is about, I don't know if I like this word or not, but where do you go for support and accountability? Because, you know, I don't know. Maybe this speaks more to me, but it's easy for me to go off the rails sometimes. I get ahead of myself, right? And then when I get ahead of myself, then Pastor Curtis has to do special prayer for me, and so yeah, because I think we think of these ministries as sort of isolated, right? And so accountability and support, for lack of a better word.
Podcasting on a budget. My budget is 0. Like, I mean, okay, I work at ABHMS, right? But my podcast, I don't use a fancy studio. I use a room at ABHMS, or I film at my house in my kitchen. I filmed yours in my kitchen. I use my laptop. I don't use mics. I don't use any of that stuff. I do have a plug-in camera that I think was like $200, a Pancast, but can I help people? Yeah. I use StreamYard as my service, and it goes live to Facebook, and you can live it to Insta and all those, YouTube and all the things. There are plenty of free services. Could I put together something to help people out? Absolutely, I could put together we could do that. I would love to do that. That would, and that's one thing that's important to me, I will say that, because when you're trying to, you don't have guests. I have to find guests. And so one would think it's really easy. It's not. A lot of times people go, sure, I would love to do the show. And then when you contact them, they ghost you. And they don't, for whatever reason. One of those things is they're like, I don't have the equipment, or I'm not that kind of person. It's just a conversation. And that's part of the reason that I only use my laptop. I turn on a light, because everybody looks better with light. And otherwise, I mean, that's it. But yes, I would be more than happy to put something together and share how people can start podcasts. I would love that.
I'm going to throw out something really quick here. It's pretty much the same thing with streaming on a budget. My first microphone was a gift from another streamer because they didn't like the one I had. My first camera was the camera on my laptop. I eventually upgraded, but you really don't have to spend a lot of money. I use a free service as well to stream. Mine is OBS, and upgrades are free and all of that sort of thing. So you can catch things on sale during the holidays. You can sometimes get a discount if you are a nonprofit. So all those things are things that you can look into. And as far as guests are concerned, we do something similar, but we call them collaborations. And it's a little easier for me to find people to collaborate with because inevitably, especially after, conventions like TwitchCon, someone will say, hey, Jane, I want to collaborate with you. Can you teach me how to make grits and I'll teach you how to make carne asada? Sure, let's do it. But it does help when the person has equipment that will let them stream the way you do. Because when there is, an issue with bandwidth and that sort of thing, that's a problem. But that's something that can be worked on and talked about.
As long as you're not teaching them to put sugar in the grits.
Thank you.
Okay, and the wasn't there another the accountability question? Maybe that's something I need a little more of in my life. I mean, I do have a person in my office that after I've recorded a show, knows exactly how I feel about it by the look on my face. I'm sorry, I can't hide my face. My face is what it is, if you've ever been in a meeting with me and I make faces, yeah, you know. But she always can tell, how I feel about that, and do you need to talk about it? There's that kind of accountability, but maybe I need more.
My audience, my ecclesia, because that's the name for my viewers, they will let me know one way or another. If I start babbling on and chat just stops, okay, maybe I've gone a little too far. If I start talking about something and people start asking me questions about it, okay, this is something they're engaged in and want to hear more about. If I'm talking about something and they keep changing the topic, maybe I need to not talk about that anymore. And every once in a while, I might say something that is inappropriate or borderline offensive, and someone will message me and say, hey, you said this, and I don't know if you know that you said that, but that bothered me. I'm like, oh, okay, let's talk about it. And I'm really sorry for saying the thing that I said. So they will let me know one way or another. And I usually get that feedback fairly quickly, but that for me is my accountability.
I don't know much about excuse me. Do you all have sponsors, or how do you get paid for this, or do you not get paid for it, or?
I don't. I mean,
What pays for the food?
really the only cost that's associated with my show are the fancy dancy t-shirts. And if you too would like a t-shirt, you're gonna need to be a guest on my show. People ask, like, how do you afford an honorarium for this? Do you work that in your budget? Honestly, no one has ever asked for money. No, they've never asked me to pay them for being a guest, and I'm not planning on starting, but everyone who's on the show gets the fancy dancy t-shirt, and I mean, that's worked into my unit, that's my budget at work. So, but otherwise, that's.
It is shocking what people will do for a good t-shirt.
That's for sure.
I mean, an hour of your time, folks. That's all I need. I need an hour of your time, and you too can sport the fancy dancy t-shirt.
For me, the dream of every Twitch streamer is to become sponsored. That is the dream. I got a free, I don't know what, it's called an Udi, and it's like a gigantic blanket, and with a hood, so it's like a gigantic, it keeps you warm, and it's wonderful, and that was it. That was the sum and total of my sponsorship, and that was 2 years ago. And, I pay for the groceries, for cooking, and, gas to and from wherever I need to go. If I am streaming with another streamer and I have to go to them, if they're local, I drive over and I bring all my equipment and all that sort of thing. So yeah, just doing it off my own budget on a shoestring. So.
I was gonna say, thinking about what you're talking about, like that is everyone's dream to be monetized, and you know, I've had that conversation with my boss, and he said it's my choice what would happen if we get there, but what I've decided is if we ever get to the monetization is that I would choose one of those folks who have come in and shared their ministry and give, you know, to give back to one of them. It wouldn't be something that I would keep. So it's the dream to one day be able to make money and then turn around and give it to the people who have shared their ministry on the show. So.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your for your presentation. And for Reverend Meg, I was just thinking that you were talking about that you don't get, you know, paid for what you're doing through ABC. But I was also wondering, wouldn't this be considered a community benefit? And couldn't you kind of like write that off as a community benefit as well? Being that it's nonprofit, and that you can slide that in, and you would still be able to report that, you know, to the IRS when you report your community benefits. Because I have a nonprofit as well, and I know a lot of things that I do, I have to write down little things. And so if you can just share more about how you could possibly consider this as a community benefit.
No, I'm not incorporated, you know. I don't know. I don't know how that would. I honestly don't know how that would work. I mean, I've done it for so long now that it is part of my job, but it's still mine. So I honestly don't know how that would work. I mean, yeah, you share. I mean, we'll strategically schedule somebody who's got an event, something coming up, and so that they can share about what that community event is, and in the hopes that more people will come out and support them. But yeah, I'm not incorporated, so I don't know how that would work.
And for me, I kind of have to take back some of what I said. I just realized that Twitch streamers at a certain level do earn money for their work. But it is a fraction. People can donate money to us. They are called bits, and we get a certain percentage of that. We do have the option to claim our equipment and the areas in which we stream on our taxes, that sort of thing, which definitely helps. But yeah, it's a small thing. As far as community benefit, I'd have to do more research, because this is not affiliated, you know, with the region or anything like that. It's just me. So I'd have to look more into that and see, you know.
Well, I hate to be that guy, but unfortunately we are kind of running out of time, and we're past time even. But I do want to ask a question, and once again, I'm going to crib from you, Meg. What is it that you guys are doing these days that brings you joy?
I think we've been talking about it for the last, I mean, yeah, I mean, getting to do this thing, but also, I mean, I'm in the midst of my dissertation thing, and that's all finally, hopefully, all coming together and getting to do your project and things like that. That also brings me joy. I'm told the best dissertation is the one that is finished, and yeah, and so yeah.
I'm going to guess this is in general as opposed to what we're doing with our various methods of either or all?
The rule on the show is you answer that question however you want.
Okay, however you want. Okay. So I will say what brings me joy is the smell of bibimbap coming from my stove. The excitement I feel when I've baked a pound cake for the first time in like 10 years and it actually comes out of the pan in one piece. You know, the sound of another streamer rating me, not because they have to, but because they know the type of person that I am and they think their community would love to join me. All of those things bring me joy. That makes me very happy and very blessed to do what I do.
Well, thank you both so much for being here, for sharing, and if you guys have further questions, you know, just waylay them in the halls and, you know, demand answers. That's, you know, good Baptist tradition.